Welcome to Slammed, an Odyssey podcast where we discuss everything Boston Celtics. I'm Meghan Ottolini of WEEI and Odyssey, joined as always by Justin Turpin, also of WEEI and Odyssey. And we are coming to you from TD Garden right after the 114-112 loss the Celtics suffered at the hands of the Houston Rockets. It was a thrilling game. It literally came down to the final seconds. And my big takeaway from this game, Justin, and I know that you have a lot of thoughts on the fourth quarter. My big takeaway, too quiet of a night from Jayson Tatum. It sounds like an obvious thing. Jayson Tatum cannot go through a half without scoring a point. It might be unfair. He's been an extremely consistent guy through an uneven season, but for him to attempt, what was it, 5 shots in the first quarter?
Half, yeah.
He was trying to be a facilitator. He was trying to get on the boards. But when you're down 3 players like they were tonight, and Al Horford, who had a bizarre time on the bench because we thought he was going to play, Derek White, and Sam Hauser, you need Jayson Tatum to fill that void. He had a tremendous third quarter with 15 points, came down to the fourth quarter and some defensive miscues, some rough moments down the stretch, but I really think it starts with that first half. You can't have a deferential Jayson Tatum at this point in his career.
Yeah, and part of that too, I thought the Celtics like to allow different players to beat them, or at least try to beat them. And that's exactly what Houston did with Jayson Tatum. With Derek White, Al Horford, and Sam Hauser out, they were blitzing Jayson Tatum on every pick and roll and forced him to be a facilitator. And a couple teams have done that now, and they've been successful, especially when over the past month, they really haven't been getting a lot of contributions up and down the roster. So as much as Boston tried that strategy, and they were very vocal, obviously, with Dylan Brooks hitting 10 threes, Houston ran it right back at him, and it worked.
Yeah, and to be very clear, something that we heard from a couple players just now post-game, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, highlighting Houston gave them their best. You got a combined 69 points from Amen Thompson and Dylan Brooks, who had a career-high 10 three-pointers. So this was an outstanding night for Houston. And again, it's a shorthanded Celtics team, but this is what you have to contend with when you're the defending champs. You get the very best from a lot of these squads. It was very different from the game that they played on the second night of back-to-back just a couple weeks ago when they were without Jaylen Brown. It felt more like this is a little bit closer to the true top 4 defensive team that Ime Udoka is at the head of. Jayson Tatum after the game said, when asked if there was anything Ime threw at him that surprised him from a defensive standpoint, he said no. I don't know. I think they looked a little overwhelmed out there.
I mean, they're blitzing him, and that Rockets team is just so good. I mean, watching them, like you said, Dylan Brooks, 36 point. Amen Thompson, I mean, he is fantastic. He was sensational tonight, obviously, with the game winner as well. That team's number 3 in the NBA right now. They passed the Celtics for 3rd place in the entire league, and you're seeing why. Like, that's a team I would not want to see in the postseason if I'm out in the West. Like that, they're a young team, and they're probably not ready for the moment just yet, but when push comes to shove, you're not going to want to see that team in the playoffs.
Terp, you brought up a stat to me that then I checked post-game. You referenced it about this 30% usage from Jayson Tatum.
Yeah.
When his usage goes below 30% this season, the Celtics are 7-10. And that just goes back to my point of maybe he's in an unfair position, but hey, he just got named an all-star starter once again. This is who he is. He's a superstar. And we praise how much he's available for his team, especially compared to other superstars who have the resume that he has already compiled at a young age. This is the demand on him. But I know that you wanted to get to the fourth quarter. What did you see down the stretch that bothered you, alarmed you, frustrated you, or just disappointed you a little bit?
So I've got the numbers right here. So the Celtics went up by 12 with 8:38 remaining in the fourth quarter. After that, Houston shot 9 of 15. That's 60%. And they were 2 of 4 from 3. Boston shot 4 of 14, 28.6%, and was 1 of 7 from 3. It just happens so much down the stretch this season that they slow down and they get out of their rhythm of their offense, and it ends up screwing them. I mean, their numbers in the fourth quarter are absolutely atrocious this year. They're 30%, and this is in losses. So fourth quarter of losses this season, 30th in field goal percentage. They're shooting 39.7%. 26th in three-point percentage, 28.6%, 22nd in offensive rating, 29th in defensive rating, dead last in net rating, minus 27.2. You know how bad that is? Minus 27.2 in the losses. That's atrocious. And opponents are just lighting them up. 53.4% from the field. That's the second best in the league. And 46.7% from 3, also the second best in the league. So you're seeing a common thread in these losses is they just collapse down the fourth quarter. They've already blown 9 fourth quarter leads. That's equivalent to all the fourth quarter leads they blew last year. That is a problem.
Do you see anything? I know that you just had those numbers, but just from the eye test of what happens with this team, you mentioned that they slowed down the offense,
Yeah.
which I think is rough. But again, you're on a night where you don't have Al Horford and you're playing a lot of Luke Cornett, who was great for 90% of the game. And then when it really came down to it, was victim of a big mismatch, a big defensive miscue on that inbound. I think there's like 15 seconds left at that point.
2 of 'em.
Yeah, 2 of them. Yeah, and it was rough for him. But other than the offense slowing down, is there anything that you see in terms of that should make fans worry about their composure?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to point to Luke because he's not really in those
Mhm.
situations, right? And he did have 2 really bad miscues down the stretch, and Joe Mazzulla took accountability for him after the game, and that's just him defending his players. I mean,
Yeah.
Luke got lost twice, and I understand there was a late switch there, and those are hard to execute in that situation, but it feels like it's just uncharacteristic mistakes are starting to become characteristic. Uncharacteristic last year, that is. Like, I keep thinking back to the Atlanta game, and I know they've had a couple collapses since then. Even the Clippers game when Jalen threw the ball away when he got trapped in the corner. But like guys like Drew Holiday making those mistakes against Atlanta, Jaylen Brown making the mistakes against Clippers. I can get behind Luke Cornett having a miscue in the clutch, but for the most of the season, it's been the guys that have been there and done that and have executed at the highest level, just having these brain farts and these collapses down the stretch. It looks like the old Celtics. And I know we keep passing it off as that they're the reigning champions and stuff, but at some point this has to be addressed. Like you cannot play like this in the fourth quarter and expect to get to where they want to be.
I agree. I think ringing the alarm bell in January, basically just before the All-Star break, it's just a different case than after the All-Star break. I'm definitely taking notice. I'll say that's my level of concern so far. We get to the point after the All-Star break, and it's this up and down, where it really just looks like the mental game at the very end of those fourth quarters, as you pointed out, is the veterans kind of having these brain farts. Then I think you're in trouble. I don't think you're in trouble right now. I think it's just a little bit frustrating sometimes from night to night. One last thing I wanted to bring up with you. The substitutions tonight were unique. And someone got mad at me on social media for saying these are unique substitutions because I don't really know how else to describe what we saw tonight. Started with Al Horford warming up in uniform, and his name was right above us on the starting lineup until maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes before the game. All of a sudden, Luke Cornett is starting in that double big starting lineup because we had expected that because Derek White was already listed out and Sam Hauser before the game. But then you get into these lineups where you have Jordan Walsh coming in, Jaden Springer, who was fantastic against the Clippers, but you get Drew Peterson in there,
Xavier
you get
Tillman.
Xavier Tillman in there. And at one point, it was like Drew Holiday and Jayson Tatum on the floor with three of those guys of the stay ready group, as the Celtics like to call them. What are we supposed to make out of the decisions with those substitutions? Is this experimentation? Is this showcasing a little bit of something at the trade deadline? Is this preserving Al Horford's health down the stretch?
Yeah, I think starting with Al, I think the fact that they're playing every other night until the All-Star break against a physical Rockets team like that, I think they're like, you're almost 40, bro. Sit down for a night and take it easy. So I think that's part of it. And just the substitutions themselves were just strange. Like you mentioned it. We were seeing a lot of the double big, but like they got Kada and Tillman on the floor together.
Yeah, that's the one I missed. Kato was out there.
Against this team, it's just like there's no shooting. It was a little bizarre. I think part of it is the trade deadline. Obviously, they've been very vocal, at least before the season, that they were open and moving Jaden Springer. And I think Xavier Tillman might be in that conversation as well now. I mean, this was his first rotation minute since November. He's essentially fallen out of the rotation, so you might try to see what you can get at him. So I don't know, it was very bizarre, and it didn't really matter, right? Because they were still up by 12 in the fourth quarter because Jayson Tatum in the third quarter really willed them ahead, and then just another collapse. So
And again, I think that goes back to my original point that as stacked as this roster is, we saw Kristaps Porzingis have a great first quarter, and Jason Tatum is still what makes the team go. And once everybody can consistently figure that out and he can take the reins on that, I think that will help the consistency of this team a lot. It sounds very simple. It's like, duh, the best player on
sometimes
the
it is
team.
simple.
But they don't, but for whatever reason, they don't always convert that way.
It's funny too. I feel like Jayson Tatum evolving as a passer is kind of hurting him now.
Mm.
Like I feel like they're relying on that a little bit too much. Where sometimes like you just got to get downhill and shoot. Like you said, 5 shots in the first half. It's just that can't happen. 14 tonight, 12 on Sunday or Saturday against Dallas. Like That can't happen. You have to have the best player on the best team has to have the ball in his hands trying to score. I mean, he averages 20 shots a game. That's 6 and 8 less than what he's attempting. That just can't happen.
All right. Well, this has been Slammed. If you enjoyed this podcast, please find us on YouTube, find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram. Like, subscribe, comment, give us reviews. We love hanging out with you. There's a ton of Celtics games coming up. Hoping to have a guest to comment on some rumors around the upcoming Celtics sale. So we'll have all that content for you later this week. Thanks, guys.